Hello, good evening, and thanks for joining me, Stephen Enti, on PM Express tonight. The MPP this year has a simple message, and this is captured in its manifesto. Change is due. To this end, the title of its manifesto is Transforming Lives, Transforming Ghana. The party hopes to embark on an audacious economic transformation when voted into power in December. Before they launched the manifesto, Asukwa MP Maxwell Kofi Juma asked that it be postponed to a later date for fear that it could be plagiarized. Now, nevertheless, party executives did not heed to this call and launched the manifesto. Is it to suggest that there is nothing worth stealing in the manifesto? Also, PPP, the Progressive People's Party, has rubbished entirely the manifesto, describing it as empty promises. Is it a fair assessment by Dr. Indium, or is it merely political talk because he himself is seeking the seat of government? What is contained in this document that the party has wasted millions of cedis to print? We'll turn the manifesto page by page tonight as we seek to inform the electorate better to make informed decisions this December. Stay with us and send us your comments, suggestions, and contributions and opinions to short code 1760, or you can post them on our Facebook wall. Tonight I have with me in the studio Dr. Owusu Efriye Akoto, who is MP for Kwadaso. Dr. Efriye Akoto is Deputy Ranking Member of the Select Committee on Food, Agric and Cocoa Affairs of the Parliament of Ghana, and he's a farmer. His profession is agricultural economist. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on PM Express.
Thank you.
Now, why did the party not heed to the request by Kofi Juma to postpone the manifesto launch, at least to such a time that both the NDC and the MPP can launch equally? Is it to suggest that there is nothing in the manifesto worthwhile stealing or pinching?
No, it's not that. I can understand my colleague Kofi Juma's concerns, because once bitten, twice shy. You know, in 2008, there were a few elements of our manifesto which found themselves into the manifesto of the NDC dressed up as other things.
Which other elements?
Classic example is the SAGA, the SADA initiative, which they claim they originated. But the idea came straight out of our manifesto, and we were calling it the Northern Development Project, at which we were going to have a seed fund of $200 million to start off a major transformation in the northern part of our country. Within 2 weeks, the NDC had come up in their manifesto, I don't know which version, because there were quite a few versions of the NDC manifesto in 2008. They were calling it SADA, S-A-D-A, and included more or less the same geographic savanna areas that we had anticipated. And they were promising 200 million Ghana cedis, not dollars. At the time, you may remember the dollar was almost the same as the cedi. And up to today, 4 years into 4 budgets, the 200 million never materialized. And we know what has happened to the SADA concept. So the skepticism expressed by my colleague, Mr. Kofi Juma, was well founded. But the thing is that the manifesto this time round seeks to transform the society of Ghana in a very bold manner, which cannot be replicated by the NDC. Because we've seen what they've done the last 4 years. The kinds of policies that they have pursued, all the social initiatives which were taken during the Kufuor era, from the National Health Service to the free school feeding program, and not only those, but also economic projects like the mass spraying of cocoa, which doubled production from 350 to 700 and put the planks in place for 1 million metric tons of cocoa, which was achieved last year, has all been thrown into the sea, so to speak, to the extent that you find pilot schemes in Ashanti, the most populous region, where we are back to effectively cash and carry. And in spite of the very desperate denials by the NDC, anybody who goes to a Komfanoche hospital will see for themselves that we are running a cash health system and not a national health system. So all these things, the mass spraying, which is now very selective, in some areas in Sefi and Brongahafo, if you are not perceived to be an NDC farmer, your cocoa farm is not sprayed, which goes totally against the whole concept of mass spraying.
But all these claims, are you fair when you make these claims? Are they backed by real facts on the ground, or you're just speaking politicians?
No, please.
They used to talk.
I'm not speaking as a politician. I'm speaking as an economist of agriculture. And you can trust me. I've been in this profession from Legon as an undergraduate through my postgraduate work in Cambridge University and working in the UN, working with governments around the world for 17 solid years in this field. And I know exactly what I'm talking about. I will be bastardizing my profession if I were to politicize this. The facts are very clear. You talk to farmers, you move around this country and talk to the relevant authorities, the health authorities in Kumasi and all that, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That I'm talking factual. You cannot run away from the fact that these programs were instituted during the Kufuor administration of the NPP. You cannot run away from the fact that as perceived and designed at the time, what we are seeing today is totally different from what we as a party and a government instituted in that period. So these are daily realities on the ground. And I can cite you, I'm a member of parliament. I have nearly a third of a million people in my constituency in Kwadaso, and nearly just below 90,000 voters. And I have an office. I have a permanent office manned by personnel documenting all the visits which the constituents make. And I can show you my logbook by the concerns which are raised. And some of these things I'm talking about, most of them are from my direct experience in my constituency. So please, let's trivialize what I'm saying by saying it's politics. It's real. People are living it, and it's painful. So let's talk about them, especially now that parties are coming out with their visions as to how to solve the problems of this country, the social problems, the economic problems facing families who cannot meet their school fees and meet their hospital bills and all that. Let's be serious about it. The essence of the transformation which the NPP is seeking through its manifesto is very clear, that all aspects of Ghanaian lives, Nana Akufo-Addo, when he becomes president, the big vision is to transform the lives on farms, in the hospitals, in schools, in the dormitories, in the marketplaces, all over, within the limits of the 4 years that the Constitution mandates it. And there are very practical programs that are on the ground that we can talk about to achieve these visions that we have expressed in our manifesto for this year.
So when the MPP says change is due and consequently goes ahead to say change now, what exactly, change now, move Ghana forward, what exactly does the party talking about? I mean, they had 8 long years to effect these transformations.
And we did a lot of transformation. There was never in the history of this country was there a national health service. Never in this country was there a free school feeding program. Never in this country was there a youth employment scheme. All these are changes. You know, I mean, Ghana has been in existence for 50-something years, and 8 years, if you come in and you are able not to talk about it, but to put down the planks of change, that is significant. And what we intend to do is to go back to the agenda of the Kufuor administration when MPP is voted back to power, to strengthen and deepen these social institutions that were put in place, not only social, but also economic and business aspects of our lives. And I can give you a classic example in agriculture. It's very clear. I sit in Parliament and I see the institutions will run to Parliament from the agricultural sector because they don't have any cover from the executive. A typical example, the Poultry Farmers Association, who came to us with documentation and everything, showing us the number of times they've tried to get a discussion in government, they couldn't get it, and they ran to us. And they have this paper, which is a very beautiful plan of the support they want from government in order that they would be able to stand on their feet. Otherwise, the industry was collapsing. Last year, you know, there was a massive shortage in our food requirements, that the government had to import 84,000 metric tons of maize, which is an indictment and is a clear evidence of the failure of our agriculture, the government's agricultural policy of the 4 years. Because 4 years before, Ghana for the first time had been self-sufficient in maize, for instance. And we're gradually building up to surplus and food security. And then suddenly, bang, a small drought in the minor season last year led to a massive reduction in the production or supply of maize, with prices shooting up, unprecedented in the history of this country, where during the minor season prices more than trebled. And of course, grains are the basic ingredients for the poultry industry. And they couldn't sustain it.
And this you cite as mismanagement or unsustainability.
Well, unsustainability because...
Exactly,
yeah,
you fault the government for this.
Yeah, of course we have to. Because they claim that they have put in place all kinds of measures for buffer stock and all that. And if you couldn't sustain food self-sufficiency with a small drought in the minor season, not the major season, not a total failure.
So what would the MPP do?
Yeah, this is what we are saying, that basically what we have seen is very clear, that all the institutions of the agricultural production and agricultural marketing associations have been sidelined. Because, as I say, it's not only poultry farmers. I cited that as an example. There are in this country institutions in both production on the field, in the farms, and those outside the farm, marketing associations for various products of agriculture, including fishermen and so on. And these institutions should be strengthened. The government should be communicating with these institutions, these bodies, in order to be able to support the industry through these institutions, and not put them aside and go for youth employment, youth in agriculture and all that, which we know is nothing to do with youth, but is the district executives, DCs and regional and so on, who are benefiting from these heavily subsidized so-called, I would call them state farms. So we have a very serious problem. And not only that, institutions like the Agricultural Development Bank, which were put in place to provide cheap credit for farmers, which almost disappeared in its mandate, because now you find that only recently maybe 15–20% of their lendings now going into agriculture instead of 95%. I mean, at some stage 20–30 years ago, it was exclusively for agricultural financing of agricultural production. And people don't realize, but 20 years ago, about 20% of total credit in Ghana went to agriculture. Now it's been reduced to 4–5%. And even the 4–5%, most of it goes into cocoa purchase. So farmers are not getting credit, and credit is one of the biggest constraints on production of agricultural produce anywhere in the world. So the NPP is, through the manifesto, saying that we will review the terms of reference of the laws governing Agricultural Development Bank to bring it back to its original mandate of financing farmers in order to increase their productivity. And so many other areas of institutional change that we want to bring as a major plank in the transformation of the lives of farmers and rural folks.
Permit me to read a section of your party's manifesto on the transformation program. That section says, our transformation agenda is simply means changing our systems, processes and outcomes to that of a modern country where things work for all. It comprises transforming our economy from its pre-independence structure to modern 21st century economy, one driven by knowledge, value addition, industrialization that will create jobs. We will also transform our infrastructure so that it works for our people and supports rapid economic growth and improves the quality of life of our communities. We will modernize agriculture to increase productivity, to feed our people and our factories. We will transform our education such that it produces a capable, confident, and well-skilled human resource that will feed an expanded economy. We will transform our healthcare to ensure a healthy population and an increased life expectancy. We will transform governance such that it facilitates the right attitudes and relationship between government, the administration, and you, the people. Now, my question is that, did the MPP not know all these problems existed? I want to assume that all the challenges cited for which the MPP seeks to correct didn't come overnight. They didn't start yesterday.
No, we were in government for 8 years. So we are very conversant with the problems. And with that experience that we had and the initiatives that we took, we have come to these conclusions and a plan of action. The vision is informed by our experience from 2000 to 2008. And we realized that in spite of the tremendous amount of progress we made, quadrupling the GDP of this country from $4 billion US to $16 billion on the old basis in just 8 years, that would have really escalated and moving us from into a lower middle income group with a GDP when we took over of $560 per head to $1,100 and nearly $1,200. That is a tremendous impact by any measure in just 8 years in any country's history. And basically, these pronouncements that you'll find in the MPP manifesto is saying that we will go along the same route and deepen all the things that Kufuor did and expand them.
These are actually concise grammatical expressions,
yes, exactly,
which might mean really very little for the ordinary man on the ground if proper implementations are not plugged in.
I think it would be very unfair to dismiss them as very, I don't know the adjectives that you used. Because, as I said, we are coming from a position of an experience that in the 8 years we went through and made things work. We made things work. The financial sector was exploding, telecom sector exploded, and all this add up to this quadrupling of our GDP. That is, our national income not only doubled, but it quadrupled 4 times, from 4 billion to 16 billion, and now we're talking about 36 billion.
Were these contained in the 2008 manifesto promise of the MPP?
Yes, but unfortunately we didn't have the opportunity to
expand
to put it in practice because we lost the election.
So
and then there's an opportunity for us to come back. So what we've done is to rehash what we intended to do in 2008 in the experience of what has happened, the disastrous, excuse me, disastrous, poor governance, typical corruption in a scale that has never been witnessed in this country, the wastage in the system. All these things have informed us with a vision that have been enumerated in this manifesto. And I can go into details to let you know exactly in practical terms what we mean by the ideas behind each of these.
Yes.
But it will take us till tomorrow or the day after if we have to go through. I will just cite you one or two other examples. I've already given you examples in the agricultural sector, in the social sector. I mean, I will give you another example. When we talk about transformation of the manufacturing, you see, job creation is almost becoming a national security problem because of the mass unemployment among the youth, both educated and uneducated. And there are ways of genuinely expanding the opportunities for jobs, which would absorb these huge surpluses that we are throwing out onto the streets and wasting the country's resources, okay? And basically, they hang on two legs. One is to do with manufacturing, and the other is to do with agriculture. These are the two real, what we in economics we call real sectors of the economy, that if they expand, will create the opportunities for jobs to come in. And this is why the agricultural plank is very important and the manufacturing is very important. If you come to the manufacturing, as Nana Akufo-Addo expatiated during his History of Economic Affairs lecture, the impulse of inputs for manufacturing at the moment are carrying huge taxes, making it very unprofitable and uncompetitive. And he's saying that we will look at them, the tax regimes on inputs for the manufacturing industries and so on, and then reduce them to make them competitive. And not only that, we have all these dumping. I mean, we have in the textile industry, Chinese goods landing on our shores are below the cost of production in their own countries. We have rice coming into this country at cost of production below those in their own countries of origin. We have aluminium products coming into this country at a cost of production below. There are all kinds of areas that our trade policy will ensure that we will take advantage of WTO systems to use countervailing taxes to ensure that our producers have a level playing field. And not only, I'm not talking about only big manufacturing concerns like Aluex itself, which has been badly hit by this poor policy of this government, but the common farmer farming rice on the shores of the Volta River, where he's so disadvantaged because the rice coming from Thailand and from America landed in this country at a price that is only a fraction of the cost of production in their own countries, and making it very uncompetitive for the poor farmer here who is sweating away to make any living out of growing rice in this country. So these are some of the things that we want to look at. I mean, they are not out of this earth, but we look at the practicalities, given the experiences we have 8 years and the nasty experiences we have the last 4 years, to use institutional means to correct these imbalances so that our producers in this country can expand their businesses, create more jobs, employ our young people, and bring prosperity to everyone.
Well, you're watching PM Express live on your multi-TV Joy News. My name is Stephen Anti, and I'm in the studio with Dr. Afriye Akoto, who is MP for Kwadaso. We will take a break, and when we return, we'll explore practical solutions to the problems facing our country, looking back into the MPP manifesto. Don't go away. Welcome back to PM Express. I'm in the studio with Dr. Afriye Akoto, who is MP for Kwadaso, and we're discussing the MPP's manifesto, which promises change to move Ghana forward. We've been talking extensively about Greek issues and mainly economy, and then their transformation agenda in general. But the PPP, the Progressive People's Party, issued a statement early today to say that the party insists that the MPP's manifesto is a set of empty promises which does not demonstrate a commitment to incorruptible leadership and competence, two key requirements for the transformational development the MPP is sloganeering. We have on the line a PPP representative, Kofi Asamoah Siao, to tell us more about this statement. Good evening, sir, and thanks for your time on PM Express.
Chief, good evening.
Wouldn't you say it's pretty unfair to describe the MPP manifesto as absolute emptiness, and you use an arboreal expression, the incorruptible leadership and competence, two key requirements for the transformational development the MPP is sloganeering, are all empty? Tell us on what premise you arrived at this conclusion.
Chief, good evening. First of all, what the PPP is saying, that different political parties, different presidential candidates use terms like transformational leadership, transforming Ghana's economy, but we are only saying that there are some fundamental things that needs to be done. And the first fundamental thing that we need to do is to ensure proper accountability and transparency in the governance processes that we have put in place. And the only way for any presidential candidate or any political party to demonstrate a commitment to giving us, the people of Ghana, transparency at the level of the presidency is to be able to commit ourselves to the things that we have just suggested. That, for example, we say that all the time, to be able to fight corruption, we say before you go into government, you do asset declaration, and that is given to the Auditor General. That is can only be reviewed to the public under a court order, and some circumstances that we think that the objective of asset declaration itself is not met.
But Mr. Asamoah Siao, asset declaration is not exactly new in Ghana, and so when you go on to list these things that you think that for public transparency and accountability, all presidential candidates should, one, publicly disclose their health records, assets, tax returns, sources of party funding, etc. These are not exactly new, are they?
They are not new, but you see that presidential candidates are not able to give us this minimal personal commitment to ensuring that at least they believe in transparency. If you can tell us, the people of Ghana, that you want to be our president, that what was contained in the document that you presented in the asset declaration form, you cannot tell us whether you are paying your taxes or not, and that even what you are paying is direct reflection of your actual income. You can't tell us this and you want to be president. How else can you guarantee us that you can ensure accountability and transparency at the helm of affairs?
But you do believe in the theme of transformational leadership, although you refer to it as sloganeering?
It is sloganeering because there are fundamental things we need to do. For example, do we subscribe to the view of the PPP that you want strict separation of powers? These are yes or no questions. Whether you want to do or you believe and accept that where we are going, looking at the conflicting roles played by the executive and the legislature, is any leader who wants transformation in Ghana ready to accept that he is going to pursue an agenda to have strict separation of powers where ministers are ministers and MPs are MPs? Number two, if you look at the way we are fighting corruption, will any presidential candidate commit himself to say that we make the prosecutor, state prosecutor, an independent body fashioned along the lines of the Electoral Commission?
But Mr. Siao, why didn't your party, the PPP, go ahead earlier before the launch of the MPP manifesto to bring out these policies, but waited to latch yourself onto the public declaration or public launching of the MPP's manifesto to begin to ride on the back of their party promises to bring forward yours? That's not fair.
That's absolutely not. We had given ourselves the issue of incorruptible leadership, that is what we represent. And if you remember, when Nana Addo had an opportunity to appear at the IEA, he actually used these words, incorruptible leadership. But we came back and said that the best way, as he said it, of flattery is to imitate. So we were happy that at least he recognized the importance of competence. He recognized the importance of incorruptibility at the helm of affairs. But all that we are saying is that beyond the acceptance, beyond making a public statement that I'm not corrupt, are you committed to practical things that needs to be done so that we can eradicate corruption in this country? If we don't do that, corruption from where we sit is the #1 enemy of this country. So if anybody wants to engage in transformation, but we cannot do two things: one, ensure presidential transparency; two, commit to constitutional reforms, all that we are saying is that transformational leadership will not come. We will not experience it. That is the basis. That is the foundation. That is fundamental to any other form of transformation that we are looking for. So if a presidential candidate and a political party cannot make firm personal commitment to ensuring these things, then we are saying that all the other things will not come. For example, the PPP is asking for free, compulsory, continuous education from kindergarten to senior high school. That, I think, is transformational. But how are you going to do it if you don't put in place mechanism to avoid wastage, mechanism to make sure that you do not, in this country, in the 2012 budget, put 700 million Ghana cedis budgeted for judgment debt? What we need to spend in addition to what is currently being spent to make sure that our transformational agenda in education, making it compulsory, and that is very significant. You cannot achieve those things when you don't eradicate corruption. And the way to do so are the two things that we have proposed. Is the MPP ready to accept that, yes or no? Is the presidential candidate of the MPP ready to make personal commitment? We had the opportunity to say that it is not a question of constitution. It is not a question of law. It is a question of leadership. When Nana Akufo-Addo referred that these are constitutional asset declarations, is a constitutional matter, of course, you can make your own declaration to the Auditor General, but you can decide as a person to make it public. Who can arrest you for making your own document public? Nobody. So are you ready to do that or not? So if you are not able to make personal commitment to these things, it makes it very difficult for us to accept that you are actually committed to transformational leadership, which we think it can only be experienced when these two things are done. And that is all that we are asking for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kofi Asamoah-Siao. He is the PPP representative, National Secretary, and you heard him talking about the fact that the MPP needs to include the strategy for incorruptible leadership and competence in its manifesto for it to make any meaning. Thank you very much. Now, let's come back to you, Dr. Afriyie Koto. You heard him clearly.
I mean, I heard him loud and clear. Here is a classic confused person who thinks that everything hangs on one line. And if it is not hanging there, then it means that it's empty promises. It's just not the way to go. I don't see the logic at all in what he's saying. I mean, he's talking about governance. Fine. governance is covered, is well covered in all its aspects, including corruption and the security of the individual and all that. I mean, it's not a question really of declaring asset by one person who is the head, which is going to, it's like a magic wand, solve all our problems with corruption and good governance. And I find the very sweeping statement which he made at the beginning about the emptiness of, the hollowness or emptiness of our manifesto is not at all backed by the confused arguments that he has used. So I will be very...
So you totally dismiss his assertions with contempt. But he makes very cogent points.
What cogent points is he talking about?
You have to have a strategy for incorruptible leadership.
Of course. I mean,
you lead by example.
If he has taken the trouble to go through that section of the NPP Manifesto of 2012, he wouldn't be talking the way he is. I think he's just talking because he wants to say something. So it's not really to do with looking at the document and analyzing it and coming up. I mean, I was very relieved when he was mumbling on about these things, about declaration of assets and so on, because I realized that the sweeping statements that he made about our manifesto cannot be taken seriously at all.
Let's step outside the box of the manifesto and look at practical solutions to our problems as a country. Let's start with education. Next year, the 4-year stream of SSS graduates will be coming out. The 3-year stream will also be graduating. We'll have 2 streams of senior high school graduates coming out. Does the MPP have a strategy to deal with this? This is going to be a huge problem,
Yes, of course it's a huge problem. But it's very simple. Results will inform how government should respond to it. It's like a laboratory experiment. You have this group of students coming out after 4 years, this group of students coming out after 3 years. They're all having the same external examination, and the results will show whether those in 4 years are 90% pass mark or 20% or and so on. That's when we will know.
Let's take, for example, the situation where all of them pass, 100%.
No, please. It cannot be. It cannot be. They cannot all happen. There's no exam.
You don't foresee.
No. I mean, it's never happened. Tell me which exams, which external exam anywhere in the world where you have 100% pass.
So you're hoping that the inability to attain 100% pass will be a major factor to determine the solution?
No, please, don't put words in my mouth. What I'm saying is that there are 2 sets of students taking the same exam. One had taken 3 years to prepare, one had taken 4 years to prepare. Let's wait and see the results. And then we can make sensible decisions as to the way forward. And this is exactly what, in his presentation, Professor Jambafo said at our Congress and yesterday at the
launch.
At the press launch. It's very clear that we wait. There's no need to rush. We are talking about the future of hundreds of thousands of kids. So we cannot be playing football with it, as the expression used by my former professor at Legon, Adem Ensah, in today's papers. We need to be very careful about this issue of the duration of SHS and JSS and all that, because it's affecting the future of a lot of our children. So once the results come, we will know how to step it and how to organize to improve the subsequent
and you realize that these might impact the cost of the MPP's free SHS policy.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, the thing is that we are saying that our policy of free education will start in October 2013. And in that quarter, we have costed it at 75 million Ghana cedis because it's only 1 term. And then the next 2 terms of the first year of that academic year, we've costed, it goes from 75 to 275 and steps out and steps up. And the total amount we have said where we are getting the money to finance it. You couldn't be more specific than that. And we are saying that at the end of the day, it's only 5.6% of Ghana's GDP which is going to cost to implement this policy, which is below the 6% average for Africa.
But that's still huge. I mean, if you make an average, Africa average, I mean,
Kenya is,
different economic factors exist in these African countries.
Kenya is beyond that, and Malawi, is it Malawi or Zambia? I've forgotten one of those small, Lesotho.
Lesotho has a very small population.
Yeah, but we have a very small population.
So, I mean, GDP calculations.
We have a very small population compared to Nigeria. We are only 24, we are not even 25 million. Nigeria, what's the population of Nigeria? So we are talking about situations. So let's look at the situations, and we are saying that by standards of the world, 6% should be a GDP should go into education, and we are far from it. And even after this implementation, we'll still be 5.6%. So it's nothing expensive. I mean, if you want to actually evaluate whether it's costly or not, we have the international standards, 6%. Ghana at the moment is 4 point something. And we're saying with this additional expenditure, it will go to 5.6. We even reach 6%. So we still have room for quality improvement and so on to bring in international standard.
Well, room for quality education to bring it to international standards. We're talking about the MPP manifesto, and I have with me Dr. Osofri Akoto, MP for Kwada. So we'll take a break. And when we return, we'll tackle the problem of health in this country by first addressing the solutions that the MPP is proposing through transformation of the NHIS. Stay with us. Welcome back to PM Express, and you can send us your comments on facebook.com/multitv PM Express, and by text 1760. We're discussing the MPP manifesto. Now, Dr. Osofri Akoto, let me ask you, with NHIS, what specifically will the MPP be looking at to strengthen the program?
You know that the NDC promised in its manifesto that there is going to be a one-off payment, premium payment. You should ask the NDC what happened to that policy. We are 3.5 months away from the end of their term. What is happening to that policy? Rather, they come up with this ridiculous, painful policy, pilot scheme in Ashanti region. Ashanti region, the most populous region in the country. And I never seen anything of what they call a pilot scheme, where you start with a bulk of the population rather than starting in a very small area to see the difficulties and the teething problems, and then you apply. They just come bang into the middle of the country and say everybody in Ashanti region, the maximum they will pay instead of the £9 or £10 per treatment is 2 Ghana cedis, 50 pesos. And you go to the hospital. The private hospitals, of course, have been banging their heads against the wall, telling the government that it is impossible to do it. And most of them have opted out of the National Health Service. And the private sector, which in our party is the engine of growth, whether it's in medicine or in farming or in housing, everywhere, the private sector are the ones who are the means by which transformation of our economy and the growth of our economy rests. If they have opted out of Ashanti, in Ashanti region, it has very serious consequences. Because, for instance, in Kwadaso constituency, my constituency, of 14 towns around Kumasi, there's not one government hospital or government facility. It's only in my time since I came that there is a clinic which has now been constructed at Apatrapa in the northern part of the constituency. Otherwise, the community has to rely on the private clinics and hospitals led by the SDA hospital in Kwadaso town itself to provide health facilities for the population. So if you bring in this so-called, capitation in Ashanti, and the private sector opts out of it, it means that the people of Kwadaso have nowhere to run to.
So what do you plan to do different?
And not only that,
how do you plan to
the nearest
resolve the
hospital
problem?
that they have is Konfanochi Hospital. You go to a Konfanochi Hospital, and I can tell you the experiences from my office in Kwadaso, where people run to me to begging for money so that they can discharge themselves from the once they've been discharged. They are held there until they pay. So when this government talks about the fact that National Health Service hasn't collapsed, I don't know where they are living. Honestly, I mean, because the communities that we have, and even here in Accra, one of my
but has it collapsed?
Well, what else? If you have to pay, we are back to the cash and carry system. And that you have to believe what I'm saying, because one of my own executives was admitted to Konfanochi Hospital. I had to arrange for 2 million, that's the 200 Ghana cedis, to be made available with the contributions from her other colleagues for her to be discharged from Konfanochi Hospital. And that's a fact. So we are living a situation, the reality of a cash and carry system rather than the pretense that we are having a National Health Service.
Let's talk about the National Family Planning Program, which is captured in your manifesto. What exactly does this mean?
You know, what it means is that if you look at the maternal deaths in this country, about 2/3 or 3/4, no, actually about 3/4 of it from research shows that that's through unsafe abortion, particularly among the young teenagers and young women in our society, who have to run to these backyard clinics and so on for illegal abortions, and things go wrong. The irony of the situation is that the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to adopt a national
health insurance scheme?
No, not a national Planned Parenthood policy was in 1969 under the Busia administration. The same year, Thailand also adopted, in 1969, they also adopted the policy. Now go to Thailand. The rate of growth, population growth has dropped as low as 1.5 or 1.4. And Ghana, we are hovering around nearly 3%. So ours has failed like many other aspects of our national life, while the Thais have benefited enormously from the introduction of the scheme. So we are saying that education, especially among...
So you're going to bring back the 1969 policy of Busia or what? I mean,
yes,
what exactly
yes. I mean,
are you going to do?
Yes, I mean, we've just shunted it aside, and we are doing something else. And we think that there's a lot to be learned from it, especially given the success story of Thailand and other countries around the world, that we need to revisit some of these institutional arrangements and policies which we have abandoned and which are causing all kinds of problems for our young women in society. And we need to cut back. You know, the last 3 years, the maternal death rate has quadrupled. And in Ashanti, it's even worse because of this whole thing about the capitation and all that.
No,
so
yesterday,
young women are dying needlessly because of what is happening.
Yesterday, when we spoke to some interested groups from the agricultural sector, peasant farmers and poultry farmers and others, one of the key things that came up was that regardless of the numerous fine promises of addressing challenges with financing, challenging with land, challenges with
changes in policy,
and all that. Yes. There was one fundamental issue which they all mentioned, that EPA, Economic Partnership Agreement, for example, is a big limitation to how things will go. What will be the MPP's posturing or attitude towards the EPA if Ghana goes ahead to finalize?
Yes, but the thing is, I hope you were there at the IAA when Nana Akufo-Addo actually excellently explained our position if he were to be the president of this country. He said that these development partners are human beings just like us, ourselves. And some of them were sitting amongst the ambassadors and so on. That if we find that the situation is really loaded against us, it's a question of communication. Go and talk to your partners. They are reasonable human beings just like ourselves. And they are no different from us. They are wealthy, we are poor. So why would a partnership agreement come to our disadvantage and impoverish us even more? So the door is always open for communication. As I said, I've already cited the case where the dice is loaded heavily against us. Even in poultry, the imported poultry. We are talking about poultry which has been slaughtered 9-10 years ago. And instead of them throwing it away, they bring it to us cheaper than our local producers can produce it, at costs which are below. So it means that these governments are promoting their supplies, subsidizing them to dump on our land. And it is a responsibility of government through its international trade policy to correct that. WTO has very specific clauses to deal with the situation. But you have to be responsible and feel part of it. I mean, like Aluex. 3 days ago, the managing director of Aluex wrote a very interesting article in the Daily Graphic, a whole page. And I wish everybody, politician or every citizen, would read that article. So it's very eye-opening. The struggle that they have with trying to meet these huge imports from China, where the product, the aluminium products are landed in Ghana at a price that Aluex buys the inputs from Valco. I mean, how can a company like that succeed? And it's one of the biggest manufacturing companies. So the government should intervene through the WTO, put countervailing measures on these imports from China, and make the level playing field for Aluex to be able to operate competitively. They are not saying that they should be given any advantage, but at least that the government should assist to make the level playing field. They've been talking like this for the last 3 years. Government has not listened.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Owusu Efiri-Akoto, MP for Kwadaso. Dr. Efiri-Akoto is Deputy Ranking Member of the Select Committee on Food, Agriculture and Cocoa Affairs, the Parliament of Ghana. He's a farmer and agricultural economist. Thank you very much, sir, and thank you to you, Kofi Asamoah of the PPP, who joined us on phone. And thanks to you, our audience out there, for making time with us. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of PM Express. My name is Stephen Enti. Good night.